Heyo, Packer fans, what's going on? Welcome to the Packers Trilogy podcast presented by the Wisconsin Sports Trilogy, the podcast for diehard Packer fans by diehard Packer fans. I am your host, Trevor. You can find me on Twitter at Bender_Trevor. Joining me, as always, is my good buddy Tyler, aka T Plush. You can find Tyler on Twitter at Tyler Kurth. As always, check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Trilogy_pod. And on YouTube, we are the Wisconsin Sports Trilogy podcast there as well. Today, we are going to take a step back because Tyler's been slacking recently, hasn't been with me. So we'll talk a little bit about the Joe Barry hire, get his thoughts on that. Talk a little bit about J.J. Watt because he's still out there. Then we'll recap the recent roster moves and give our predictions moving forward. What's going to be the next thing to happen? Before we get to all of that, Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing quite well. I have been slacking on the Packers Trilogy podcast, so thanks for singling me out there. But it's winter. I got to go out and snowmobile, enjoy what snow is left there. We're getting some nice fluffy stuff here down in central Wisconsin right now anyway, but it's supposed to be 40 degrees this week, so we'll see. I'm doing good. Winter's been treating me well. The Packers have been busy. Like normally this time of the year, everyone's just kind of focused on draft stuff, but nope, all sorts of roster moves going on. So it's cool to have some news to talk about anyway.
Yeah, it is. And if we're being completely honest, I had been slacking with the Brewers Trilogy podcast as well. So if we're going to be fair, well, I should probably mention that we have been struggling to get together on some of these. So it's good to be back. We got the Brewers one recorded earlier. It's good to be back. Very good to be back together here. So the past two podcasts where I haven't had Tyler with me, I've done a lot of talk about Joe Barry, so I don't want to spend a lot more time on that. Hopefully Tyler listened to those so he knows my thoughts on those. But Tyler, what are your overall thoughts? You've had some time to kind of digest the hire and all that kind of stuff. What are your overall thoughts from Joe Barry being the new DC?
Well, I did listen to you, so I haven't been slacking in that regard. But I do think he's going to bring like an element of energy, which you mentioned is kind of like what is going to be needed like to be a coach under Matt LaFleur. So I think that's going to be important. You went into a couple like breakdowns of films from him in the past, and you mentioned a lot of like Tampa 2 being played, if I remember correctly. So, and then you also mentioned like when he was coaching with Preston Smith, he seemed to bring kind of a little bit more pressure, I guess, in the game that you were watching in particular. I can't remember who that was against anyway. So first off, I think unfortunately that means Preston Smith is here to stay given their history, which kind of makes me sad. You might disagree, but I don't know. They know each other. I think they're going to try and, figure out what the hell went wrong with Preston last year and go from there. But kind of off topic there. Can you remind me, so Joe Barry, you mentioned the Tampa 2. What is his going to be like his overall kind of like scheme? How many linebackers is he going to want to play? How many defensive linemen? Is he going to like kind of bring up like a safety to play linebacker as well like we've been doing in the past? Or what's all that going to look like?
So it's hard to say because he, for lack of a better term, grew up in Tampa 2. That when he was in the NFL, that's the defense that he was in. He was in it in Tampa. I think he was there as the linebackers coach when Gruden and the Bucs won it back in early 2000s, whenever that was. And then, he was back with the Bucs in 2009, right after he was with that stint with the Lions as DC, where everyone said he had the worst defense. They were a terrible team. They were 0-16. They were a terrible football team, and it wasn't his defense that made them 0-16. They were just bad. There was not talent to work with. I don't think that's indicative of the kind of coach he is. So that's why I didn't even go back to the Lions tape because that was just a bad football team. But in terms of what I saw, like I said, it was very the two schemes seemed different in his time, between 2015 and 2016. Again, I did week 1, I think that was against the Dolphins in 2015, and then I did like week 10 against the Bengals in 2016. And 2015, I saw a lot of Tampa 2, especially early on, a lot of zone coverage in like the first and second downs when they were passing. It was almost exclusively Tampa 2 coverage. Third downs, I did notice a little bit more zones, some pressures. And then I noticed a lot more of that in 2016. There was a lot more man coverage. There was a lot more. They weren't always blitzes, but he was definitely trying to get guys home, on stunts and different things. There was one in particular, I think I mentioned on last week's podcast, was that he sent a blitz on one side heavy, and then he stunted on that side as well. So it created, it was only, 3 or 4 guys or 4 or 5 guys were blitzing, but 3 or 4 of those guys were on one side, and then on top of that, they stunted, and it just made it confusing for the offensive line. So that's kind of stuff was exciting, and that's kind of what he was more in 2016, or at least in that game. Now you move forward, and he was just with the Rams, who he was the coaching the linebackers there. They just had a very good defense, and it sounds like he was very much coaching safeties and linebackers. So there might be some of that crossover where he has the safeties come up and play that hybrid linebacker role. I don't know, because he has some varying schematic differences that he's coached in the past. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what he settles in. Now, the rumor has been that Matt LaFleur kind of wanted that Vic Fangio type of defense. Brandon Staley ran that last year in Los Angeles. So, you put 2 and 2 together, you'd think that he's going to kind of follow that Vic Fangio type of defense. But, all the stuff before that was Tampa 2. So is there some combination of the two? How are they going to do that? I don't really know. But it's definitely going to be something that we're going to learn. And I won't pretend to know that I know for sure. I just know what I saw over those 2 games, and then what the Rams were this past year. So we'll have to wait and see, I think, once there's actually games to watch to see. But I do think there is some varying backgrounds for him that's going to make it interesting, and hopefully he uses that, because Matt LaFleur purposely got Nathaniel Hackett for the reason that he wasn't in the same scheme. He wanted some of that differing mindset and to blend the two if you can, to try to better the scheme as a whole. So hopefully Joe Barry has been able to do that. I imagine with Matt LaFleur hiring him, he had to have a pretty convincing plan. So hopefully all that works out. And at this point, I think that's what you have to do as Packer fans. You can't bitch about it anymore. Let's just go in and hope that he's going to be good and he's going to figure out how to be a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, like kind of what he settles into. That was interesting to me because assuming we get some preseason games this year, you might kind of get like a sense of, what he wants to be in per se. But like adaptability, I think, is going to be the biggest part because you got to match the personnel on what's coming on the offensive side, what's coming at you, who's trying to score against you. And like with Pedant, it was a lot of the same shit, for lack of a better term. Like there was no creativity. You knew what you were getting in the Packers defense. And hopefully with Joe Barry, he's able to mix it up, like you said, he's coming in, bringing new, fresh ideas. So maybe not knowing what his base is, or I think that's going to play to the Packers' advantage, at least for this first year. The last little bit I have on Joe Barry is I find it really interesting that for a team that at least it feels like to me and many other Packer fans that like we really kind of don't value the linebacker position. And now we're bringing in Joe Barry, who is a linebackers coach, a former linebacker, has developed Corey Littleton and done all this kinds of stuff. So I think that's kind of a good mix there as well. And it'll be an interesting perspective and kind of how he works with Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin and kind of progresses those two as well.
Yeah, and I hope there's some overlay like there was in LA where, safeties would come up and play the linebacker position. I like that. I like that style of it's not even a style of defense. It's more just a way to use their players. And when you have players that are athletic, especially on obvious passing downs, it makes sense to get more coverage type of players in there. I actually have my notes here, so let me go back to be sure. But looking at what I saw in that 2016 game, most of the time they were in a 3-4 front. So what the Packers run now, 3 down linemen, your outside linebackers, your 2 inside linebackers, right? That was what most of the time was. Maybe there was some safeties in as linebackers in all 22. It's hard to tell the numbers exactly, so I don't know exactly there. A lot of the times I saw in sub-package, obvious passing downs, I saw 4 up front, 4 down linemen. I imagine right now that's going to be Rashawn Gary, Zadarius Smith, Kenny Clark, and I don't think Preston Smith's going to be on this team, even with their background with each other. I don't think he's going to be on the team. So it's either going to be a Dean Lowry, who probably not going to be on the team due to money issues. So it's Kingsley Keke, it's Tyler Lancaster, it's maybe this guy you might have heard of named J.J. Watt, if they're able to bring him on. So 4-man fronts, getting after the quarterback that way in sub-package. Then you have 2 linebackers set up and 5 defensive backs. That's what it looked like, third down passing situations. It was that 4-2-5. And in base, it looked like 3-4 more often than not. So I know you asked that earlier, but I just wanted to bring that up. Let's move ahead to one J.J. Watt, Tyler. So I know there's been a lot of talk about this throughout the Packers blogosphere. Everyone's talking about it. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I feel like everyone has spent a lot of time on it, but let's just get your thoughts. Are the Packers going to sign J.J. Watt, or is he going elsewhere?
Well, the rumored elsewhere now is the Chicago Bears, and I really, really don't want to see that. I guess like his wife or fiance, whoever it is, plays like professional soccer in somewhere Chicago. I don't know. But yeah, he better not go to the Bears. If he goes to the Packers, man, I don't know. Obviously, there would have to be some sort of discount. I'm not expecting him to sign for the veterans minimum or anything like that, but there's going to have to be some sort of discount. And I think, yes, he would absolutely fit in well here. But my cousin proposed this hypothetical question to me. He said, hey, if you could sign J.J. Watt or re-sign Aaron Jones, which one would you choose and why? And I was like, man, that's a really tough question. So I posted it on Twitter to our account at trilogy_pod, and 60% said they'd sign J.J. Watt. And I had a comment on there saying J.J. Watt would give them the 4-man front that would win them the Super Bowl. Well, okay, yeah, I guess on paper that sounds good, but we lost to the Buccaneers because we didn't score more points than them. Our defense kept us in the game, and Aaron Jones was out. Aaron Jones is in his prime. I think I'd rather have Aaron Jones, even though running backs are more replaceable in this hypothetical situation.
Yeah, just draft Demetric Felton in the 3rd or 4th round, and you have your back that can kind of hit home runs, and I would love that. And I agree. That 4-man front would be Super Bowl caliber instantly, and it would definitely help with that. And don't tell me this defense yes, second half they played a lot better, kept them in the game, yes, but they also gave up 21 points to this Buccaneers team in 2 quarters. So you can't tell me just forget the defense and let's go score more points. This team had the best offense in the league. Let's go solidify that defense. You make that front 4 ridiculously good. Now you bring in a linebackers coach that can hopefully develop one of or both of Kamal Martin, Chris Barnes. You have solid safeties on the back end. You have Jair Island on one side, and you go and draft a first-round cornerback and hope that they can play, and you're looking pretty damn good. I don't think the J.J. Watt signing is all that likely. I mentioned that when the news kind of broke and all that stuff on that podcast. I don't really think it's going to be all that likely. But if I'm taking one or the other, as much as I love Aaron Jones, as big a part of the offense as he is, as much as this offense changes when he's not in there, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, A.J. Dillon, Allen Lazard, Big Bob Tunyon, those guys going to be able to figure it out. And honestly, right now, I think running back is far lower because now David Bakhtiari, you don't know if he's going to be back week 1. Rick Wagner's not on this team anymore. This offensive line, Corey Linsley, doubt they're going to be able to sign him back. There's some holes missing there. So if I had to pick between the two, J.J. Watt, Aaron Jones, I'm picking J.J. Watt. But right now, I think the more important spot is offensive line than either of those two players. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens there. I mentioned Rick Wagner being cut. That release saved the Packers $4.25 million. Kirksey also got cut, the linebacker Christian Kirksey, and that saved $5.6 million. Tyler, what are your overall thoughts on those two moves?
Well, I think the Kirksey release is a no-brainer, right? I don't think he lived up to the expectations of anyone this year. I mean, he stayed healthy, which was good, but we expected him to bring kind of a downhill thumper type presence, and it just wasn't quite there. So that made sense to me. Rick Wagner really caught me off guard for a couple different reasons. First off, another reason why they potentially cut him was because apparently he was contemplating retirement, which just sounds absolutely crazy. I mean, he's coming off a year in which he gave up 1 sack, according to Pro Football Focus. I mean, he's 31 years old. So, I mean, I know these guys take a beating. We don't see a lot of what goes on in the trenches there. And 31 is, getting near dinosaur age in offensive lineman terms, but he had a really great season. I thought for sure, he wouldn't want to retire. He'd want to come back and get another shot at a ring here, but doesn't matter. Packers cut him anyway. So that caught me really off guard.
Yeah, I think that one hurts a lot, Rick Wagner. Obviously $4.2 million, it's not like it's nothing, but I feel like to save $4.25 million on a guy that is going to be very important and was very important to this Packers team this year, especially injuries crop up, especially knowing that David Bakhtiari may or may not be able to start this season in 2021. That one hurts a lot. Clearly, they need to cut cap. They need to do it. I just felt like there's probably better ways to do that. One of them, Preston Smith, is a key guy. You have other ways to save cap. You can restructure Za'Darius's deal. You can extend Devontae Adams. In extending Devontae Adams, I think Ken Ingalls put out a potential extension for Devontae Adams, which would save about $4 million as well. So you could do that and keep him. I think that would have been probably a better move, but I guess that one was frustrating. I understand the Kirksey one, but I just felt like at a very key position, losing a solid guy it sucks. And this is something that the Packers do all the time, unfortunately, is they would rather move on from a player now and, save some money than keep that player for an extra year or two and they really drag down the team, especially offensive linemen. We saw that with Josh Sitton, TJ Lang. We saw it with both those guys. They'd rather get them out the door and not have to pay them too much money, especially when and if that decline starts to happen with age, with injuries, whatever it happens to be.
Absolutely. What did you say the savings was with that Adams extension that you mentioned?
So I mentioned that on one of my last podcasts. I believe Ken Ingles came up with a potential salary cap savings there with that move. I believe it was somewhere around the 4 million, and I can go back for sure to see what exactly that is, but I believe it was somewhere around 4 million.
Okay. Yeah, Ken Ingles is obviously a smart guy. I have this this article pulled up here from Packers Central on Fan Nation, and the way they have an Adams extension looking here is obviously in 2021 he's owed $12.25 million. That's his base salary, has a cap number of 16.8. So if they go the typical way where Packers restructure their deals, they could potentially lop his cap number down to 9.6, which would save him save the Packers $7.2 million in cap. So that would mean that they'd be slashing as much salary as they can for next year and then give him a huge roster bonus in 2022. So that's kind of how they did that. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I was able to find it. So it was 4.42 million in 2021. So basically that was probably more at the extreme level of trying to cut everything they possibly could for 2021. That in turn means they're going to pay more down the road. Ken's here is a little bit less extreme. I don't know where the Packers would go with that. You have to think, if you push the money down the road for Davante Adams, knowing a new media deal's coming, all this stuff, you're probably going to feel pretty comfortable that Davante Adams is going to be able to play at a high level so long as he stays healthy. So, if there's a player to push money down the road, Davante Adams is probably that guy. Davante Adams, Kenny Clark, some young guys that maybe you could push some money down the road. But he's definitely one of them that if you're going to do it, that is one you could do as much as you could to save. Like I said, Ken's was a little bit more conservative for that. I do really think that it'll be interesting to see all the moves that are going to come in the next, 3 weeks or so before the new league year, because the Packers have to get under the cap. And if they want to sign J.J. Watt, they have to get under the cap and then some to be able to sign him to stay under the cap. And then on top of that, you have to have extra money to sign your draft picks, when injuries happen, to sign players during the year, all of that kind of stuff. So there's definitely more moves, and they're going to be coming fast and furious, I think. In the next few weeks, we're going to see a lot of them for the Packers because they just have to 100% have to do that at this point. So we're saying that there's going to be a lot of moves coming up. Tyler, what's going to be the next move? Do you got any insight, any guesses for the next roster move for the Packers?
I think I do, but I want to get your clarification on this because obviously I do a lot of reading as well, and I see a lot of people talking about the potential savings if you cut Devin Funchess, and then, I got confused because he opted out, last year. So does his contract that he signed with the Packers just carry over to next season, or how does that work?
Yep. Anyone that signed a contract or anyone that opted out, their 2020 money just gets transferred over to 2021. They did get some sort of, depending on the type of opt-out they were, if they were like a medically high risk or something, or family's high risk or something, they got a certain stipend. I think it was $350,000 or something for 2020. But yes, their contract basically just goes from 2020 to 2021.
All right. Well, as cool and dandy as that is, I think he's the next one to be cut. So that'll save the Packers $1.27 million, which, it's a little bit, but I think I'm slowly jumped a little bit more on board the MVS train this year. And heck, we even saw EQ come up with some catches this year, and the way Tanyan developed. I mean, he was essentially, your third, we'll call it third option, whatever you want to call it, but scored a lot of touchdowns for the Packers. And I don't think they have a need for Funchess. If you can save that money, why not do it? So small cut, but I think he'll be next.
And what did you say? 1.25 million?
2.7. Yep.
2.7. I mean, to me, if if that's all the money you're going to save, I think, even if you're going to cut him, I think, or plan to cut him, I don't understand why he would be the next one, because that's money, you get right up to the league year, you can just say, okay, then we'll cut him. But if it might be a player they want on the team, because he's a good player. And I don't know if everyone, in 2020 he didn't play, so they just think he's going to be trash, or, now Packer fans think they don't need a wide receiver, or what the consensus is, but everyone just assumes that they're going to cut Devin Funchess. And I'm just sitting here like, he's making barely over $1 million. I don't know. That's not going to save you. Maybe it will if you get right down to it and you got to cut him, then fine. But it's not like cutting Preston Smith, who's going to save $8 million on the cap. I think that is more likely. That's the prediction I have, is Preston Smith is going to be the next one. If the Packers could somehow get under the cap without cutting Preston, he's going to be a post-June 1 cut, because if they post-June 1 him, they save $12 million on the cap in 2021. But I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, because I think they're going to need the $8 million before that just to get under the cap before the new league year. So I'm guessing Preston Smith's going to be the next one. It's going to be a big chunk of change there. The other things that I was thinking of here is a Za'Darius restructure, an Aaron Rodgers restructure, or Adams extension. I think Z's could be a restructure and extension as well. You might add a year or two and spread that money out on the back end again. We'll have to wait and see on that, but I'm going to go with Preston being the cut. But like I said, if they can wait, they can save an additional $4 million if they post June 1 him, but they don't get that money till June 1 then. So if they need to get under for the league year, Preston Smith's going to be cut. If they have a plan to get under without cutting Preston Smith, I imagine he will be a post-June 1 to, if he's a post-June 1 and then you can, J.J. Watt's still on the market, or K'Wan Short, who recently got cut. There's going to be a lot of veterans cut this year, so then you can sign some of those players later on. It'll be interesting to watch. Tyler says Funchess is the next one out. I'm going to say Preston Smith, and I imagine there'll be something that we'll talk about. I imagine it'll probably be neither one of those moves, because Tyler and I never get these things right. But make sure you check us out next week, where we'll have a new podcast. If we're feeling up to it, it'll be live streamed again like this podcast was on Twitter and on YouTube. So make sure you guys are checking us out on all our social channels. And until next time, go Pack Go.